How's everything going your way?
So we'll go ahead and get started with the neighborhood Ward 1 Neighborhood Advisory Board meeting for Monday, February 13th, 2023. Can I get a roll call, please?
Chair Ginsburg,
Here.
Daft Perry,
Here.
Piskovich, absent at this time, Ross. Here. Shrimp.
Yes.
Season,
Here.
Wager. Here. Morning House,
Here.
and Councilmember Breckus is here, and I am here as well. Mr. Chair, you have a floor.
All right, we're going to move on to item A2, public comment. This item is for either public comment on an action item or for any general public comment, and is limited to no more than 3 minutes for each commentator. Do we have any public comment?
Mr. Chair, I have no comment registered at this time. Would anyone in the room wish to give public comment? Would anyone on the Zoom like to give public comment? If you'd like to give public comment virtually, please indicate by raising your hand in the Zoom function. There's no public comment at this time, Mr. Chair.
All right, we're going to move on to item A3, approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting, February 13th, 2023. Has everybody had a chance to review? Are there any changes that we made tonight?
There are no changes to the agenda, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to need a motion to approve.
I move we approve.
Motion from Rhonda, second from Jerry. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to item A4, approval of the minutes from December 12th, 2022 and January 9th, 2023. So we'll start with December 12th, 2022. Has everybody had a chance to read those?
There is one correction to the December minutes. Just noting that member Ross was present at the December meeting as listed as absent.
Okay.
Along the same lines, I wasn't here.
That's the mix up. Thank you.
And with those two items.
That's okay.
Any other changes? We have a motion to approve the minutes from December 12th, 2022.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I'll go just the first, Rhonda second. All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Now we'll move on to the January 9th, 2023 minutes.
Another small correction, Mr. Chair, on page 2 of the January minutes, paragraph 4, the testimony from Councilmember Breckus. It should say Councilmember Breckus advised that she was reviewing the ability for the state to regulate train operations rather than a state.
Okay. Any other changes? All right, hearing none, we'll need a motion to approve the minutes from January 9th, 2023.
Motion to approve.
Justin first. I'm gonna go with Jerry's. All right, all those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes. We'll move on to item A5, council liaison report.
Okay, I just have a few things to go over. One, you may have heard that the city council last meeting settled with an individual who attended the protest in May of 20 and was harmed by some non-lethal weaponry that was projected at her by one of our police officers. That was when City Hall was breached and there were riots downtown. I did not support that settlement because our situation is that the agenda posts on Wednesday, the council packet is available on Friday. I read it over the weekend. I ask any questions I have leading up to the meeting, and then Wednesday we vote. And, on any council agenda that can be this thick, to this thick, we have done often, I'd say 25 to 30% of what we do are agreements. We're entering into agreements because that's a job of the council. And in those agreements, we authorize the mayor and the city manager to sign. On Friday, when I got the packet for that, I wanted to see the settlement agreement. There were 5 bullet points that outlined the agreement, and we heard those in closed session, but I wanted to see it inked. I think that I read all agreements. I think that, the constituents that send me there want to make sure that I've read the agreements. I'm not an attorney. Sometimes indemnity clauses mess me up, but I'm going to read an agreement, particularly on a topic of so much importance, which is excessive force by police officers citizens, and that was the first one we've settled of that nature since I've been on. And there was no agreement. And they uploaded the agreement just as we were talking, and the attorneys and our attorneys independent said, I haven't, I just got the signatures for the agreement. I'm like, well, the counterparty doesn't get to see the agreement before me, the decision maker. I'm looking at it. I don't see it. It's not here. I'm not voting for it. And that's why I didn't vote for it. There was no opining on the nature of the settlement, the claims, the amounts. But I did want to see how all that was written up. And, you know, when I finally was able to look at it, I asked the body to take a break. One of the clauses was parties have read the document and understand the document. And I basically felt it was legal malpractice on behalf of our city attorney to recommend and have another party sign when the council hadn't seen it. So I did not support it, and that's what happened there. Other council businesses, we do have an appeal coming that I saw got filed on that Riviera Street apartments that you all came before. Because we sit as an appeal body on a decision of the planning commission, I don't have conversations with the developers, their lobbyists, or their planning technical staff, nor do I have conversations with opponents or residents. Just, it has to all be on the record at the meeting or written, because it's like sitting as a judge. We sit as a judge, due process is involved in that. So that's coming forward for the council. The Globe Plaza issue was also approved. That's a Ward 1 issue. That was not appealed to the council. And so that's going on. The stormwater ordinance is still out for public review, and there's a lot coming in, and there are concerns mounting. I had concerns about 9 months ago before they went out for public review. I expressed those to staff, and a lot of those concerns are being represented. And it's unfortunate that it seems to be taking on water, if you will, this whole thing, and not progressing as
Jenny,
yeah.
you say it's out for public review, but there isn't much notice about that.
Well, it was in everyone's sewer. It was in everyone's sewer bill. Notice of it, and there is a website that's pretty.
Yeah, I know, I've seen the website.
Yeah,
So to that effect.
yeah, Yeah.
I've been through the website.
yeah,
It's pretty high level. There's nothing in there that says why there's a 300% tax increase.
yeah.
To add to the frustration, I actually put in a public records request for that.
Okay,
I'm still waiting on it because it's too voluminous.
okay,
Is their
yeah,
response.
yeah,
And to make it even worse, the way I actually got good information is in the worst way possible. I called a friend who works in the city and I got to talk to somebody.
yeah.
Like that's the worst way possible.
Well, the technical staff assigned to it are, doing a fair amount of, public, conversations. They should answer the phone and get to it. I think, because we just upped the connection fees for the sewer, and they both came out as policy direction around the same time to the council. And the sewer, which was really doing the connection fees, which unlike the rates had been stuck. And so through this whole development boom, people weren't getting escalated charges. They were paying 2012 money. That went rather smoothly. But the stormwater, I think through the public review, is raising more questions than it's answering. So I think it will be iterative. And it's unfortunate because I think, stormwater, we need to get there. So that is.
I'd love, the last two meetings I've asked for discussion on that.
Yeah,
And I really think there are so many issues that relates to this part of the city on stormwater.
yeah,
They don't even have a list of projects. I mean, what are they going to spend money on, for example? The credits that they
Yeah.
proposed is, there's so many issues with that. That
I
yeah,
echo your concerns.
Yeah.
One thing that I would say is, when I did talk to this gentleman, told me how much they get right now to the stormwater. Oh my God, you're doing an amazing job with those few pennies that you get. Like they really are, what that they get. It's really needed. I just wish they were more transparent about the process.
yeah. I mean, we did have some projects done after the 17-18 flood, Aquila, and people know that. So Tyler, can you, at least find out what the schedule is? Because I want to know what the schedule is. We used to have a 3-month calendar, so the council could always see when things were coming. And our city manager got rid of that about a year ago. And so I have no idea what's coming on the agenda at any time. And under our rules, the manager and the mayor set the agenda. So I do want to know, and because I keep getting input, I'm getting input from a lot of folks. So I just want to let people know that's something that has my attention. And then we're moving into budget season. And I'm really nervous about it. We're cutting a little bit down on sales tax, and I think even property tax, which is mind blowing that property tax wasn't keeping up because, we've got those distribution warehouses coming on. So it's going to be really interesting when we move into budget, which will be the mid-March. I think it's the first one. The last thing is, well, maybe next meeting or soon, the Public Works project that are kind of on hold in the ward, which, had some struggles last year, is the Watt Street one. We know that should be all buttoned up. And then the roundabout at Mesa Park is, buttoned up too, but it's supposedly, and that's an RTC NDOT project, but it's been such a big winter, that we're not really seeing stuff, and I'm sure operations and maintenance, which hasn't gotten to the California Avenue sidewalk, is just, overwhelmed, and we'll talk about that with the cul-de-sac. So anyway, that's that, but I just want to know that, come March, those are back on my radar, because that's when you would presume that the ones that, stumbled or failed to thrive last season would be the first ones up next season. They're not going to be the August project, they're going to be the March, April projects, I would presume. And then there is this week, I think it's Wednesday night, a vigil that a group is having. They had it last year on the plaza in commemoration of the folks who died. And last year, I think there were 52 or 55 folks who died, homeless people out in our streets. And this year it went up to 98. So it's going to be a longer and colder event. And it's a very important one, and moving. And in terms of homelessness, now that the county's taken it over, it's not been something I've been engaged with too much, which is good. The county's assigned the responsibility under state and the funding to provide those services, but the city then, is more the focus on subsidized housing and affordable housing. Not that a lot is being done on that path. I think there's still some things that really need to get done that, do not seem to have the staff's attention, but just, it's a big difference for me at the council level on the homeless issues, now that the CARES campus is in place, but the need is overwhelming too, and there's still a lot. And I think that number of, almost a doubling of homeless people who died out on the streets is really indicative of how bad the problem is right now.
Does something break down the causality of those deaths?
I think they do, but I think those are with the coroner.
I mean, are we talking about people freezing to death on the street, or?
I can't remember. At the vigil, they'll mention the name and the age. And I think last year, maybe there were 2 women, that was, and the ages are interesting too, but I think and I think this is Reno who maybe does a review on it and gets the information straight from the coroner's office, or the medical examiner. We have a medical examiner. And so, yeah, but, freezing or an OD, they're kind of, the OD, then they, so that.
Lack of healthcare.
Yeah, and then Tyler and I are doing a monthly tour, got back going. We did ours last Friday. So anyone has any things that they think, we should look at, where did we go last weekend? We went to Westfield Village because there were some concerns there about parking. We went to Vine Street. There's someone got a code violation there. And is appealing to the hearing officer. And then we just did a drive-by. We went by Orange Lane. Where else? Oh, we went, and then sometimes we do leave the ward. We went to Teglia Park over, so we do leave the ward occasionally, but, if there's anything that has anyone's attention, let us know. And that's all I have. So,
All right, thank you. We'll move on to item A6.
I've got a question for Jenny, if you don't mind.
Okay.
I have people who are interested in the survey that we discussed last month with Barbara Bennett and Wheatville Park. Evidently, nothing has been posted yet. And so I've had some inquiries as to when that survey might be posted.
I'll have Tyler follow up on that.
I'll reach out.
Yeah.
I'll reach out to city staff and I'll reach out directly to you.
Yeah, because that was through the Parks Department
Mhm, I remember.
and their contractor. Yeah, okay,
Thank you.
Any
okay.
other questions for Jenny? All right, we're gonna move on to item A6, staff liaison report.
Hello, everyone. Tyler Shaw, your new community liaison. I have a few short items for you all today. To start, the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission is now accepting applications for their public at-large representative to serve on that commission. Applications are being accepted from qualified individuals to serve on the commission. One individual will be selected, and I put the flyer that they sent us in your board packet. So if you know anyone who meets the qualifications and is interested in serving, please let them know. And then we have a few public engagement sessions that are coming up. The first is the Virginia Street Placemaking Study. It's the final public engagement session, and it'll be at City Hall and Council Chambers, and it's also by Zoom. And that is going to be on Thursday, February 23rd, from 5:30 to 8 p.m. Thursday, did I say Thursday? No, sorry, Thursday, it is Thursday, sorry if I said Tuesday. It's on Thursday. During this session, Gail will present design and program recommendations inspired by research, community surveys, and input from the last public engagement session in November. And there will be a survey following this engagement session that will be available on the website for 2 weeks. And then they'll present the final plan to council this spring. And then the next public engagement session is the micromobility pilot project. This is with city and RTC staff. They'll be holding a public meeting to discuss the results of the micromobility pilot project, as well as gather input on the future of micromobility in downtown Reno. This one will also be at City Hall and Council Chambers and also via Zoom. And that one will be on Thursday, March 9th at 6 p.m. And then my last announcement, our next Ward 1 Neighborhood Advisory Board meeting is scheduled for March 13th at 5:30 p.m. right here.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
Yes, on the application, for the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission, are you on that, Jenny?
I am. Yeah.
So what is their mission predominantly?
Oh, boy. They actually get they prepare a regional plan, and so, all really comprehensive to water. And, they also get a funding source. So they're one of the few agencies that has a dedicated funding source to advance, water projects and water efforts.
Does that come out of the TEMLA bill?
It does. Yeah. And so what we do is, the board, it's really an interesting thing because there's the planning commission. I'm on the governing board, but the planning commission adopts the plan and then sends it up to the governing board. And it's an interesting document. It's worth a read. It goes through like a very five-year revision. And it's an interesting time to be in water because drinking water is so related to effluent water right now. So there's whole chapters being evolved and discussed that were, in the last 5-year update. But then they also grant a lot of projects. And one, for example, that came forward was nonprofits or government agencies. The city often applies for some. Is the Truckee Meadows Parks Foundation applied for a doggy waste pickup thing, or the bathrooms along the parks. Put a bathroom along, so improving water quality. And we even fund stewardship projects way up in Tahoe to eradicate invasive species and make pristine the watershed way up there. And then the city of Reno will use it for some science related to discharge permits, so it's very broad.
Does its emphasis more quality or quantity or both?
It's everything, so it is very comprehensive. Yeah, I remember when the bill and the body kind of formed in coordination with Tumwa being spun out from Sierra Pacific Power and Water Company about 20 years ago, when the region decided to take ownership of the water purveyor public, which was a great thing.
Any other questions for Tyler?
Thursday, 5:30 to 8. What was the date?
For which one, the Virginia placemaking or the micromobility?
First one, the placemaking.
February 23rd.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We're gonna move on to business items next. So B1 is the renaming of Old Creamery Alley. This is discussion only. Amy Pennington.
Is this where you'd like me to present from?
Sure.
Maybe down here, actually, I don't,
Wherever she can.
or maybe right, yeah.
Unless you got a point.
Lucy is.
You got a point at something, then you
Yeah.
don't want to be up there.
It's, I don't need to necessarily be close to the screen.
Okay.
Or down there, or down there.
I don't want to look at the screen. I'm not like over here.
Wherever you're more comfortable. How's that?
Well, this is great.
Perfect.
Sorry, man. Yeah, I'm pulling it up. It's just
Okay.
going extra slow tonight.
Wonderful. Well, he's finding that I can introduce myself. I am, well, Bill.
Getting closer now.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
That's the one.
My name is Amy Pennington. I'm with the Public Works Department. I do special projects and community outreach. And yes, I'm here tonight to talk about the naming of an unnamed alley to Old Creamery Alley. And you may all be familiar with this alley. It's actually come to the NAB previously to this. So I'm here to bring an update on where we're at in the process right now. And you can go to the next slide. So the unnamed alley is located right here. It's between St. Lawrence Avenue, Reno Avenue, Plymouth Street, and Humboldt Street. And this originally was brought up by residents who lived on the alley who wanted to, they found some confusion with their deliveries and emergency services because the alley didn't have its own name. And so they requested a name be brought forward. And as you may recall, it went to the Street Naming Commission and came to the NAB. The NAB had a suggestion for a different name, Old Creamery Way, as a nod to some a historic operation of that area. And so I'm back here today to tell you where we're at. Go to the next slide. So on January 19th, the Regional Street Naming Commission heard this name option for the street and they unanimously approved it. And we can go to the next slide actually. And the name was chosen because of the historic significance. There was a creamery called the Mount Rose Creamery that was at St. Lawrence. It was actually, the residence was 222 and the creamery's address was 232. And it was there, sometime between 1913 and 1917, it was established. And it's not clear exactly how long it was there, according to my research with the some people from the historic resources. However, we do know that it was there and it served the community. And this happens to be an ad that was from 1918 about says, Uncle Sam says, give the children milk, who are now ready to serve them with milk, 100% pure. So there's a history and a heritage there. And this is a way to recognize that as we name this alley. And so, go to the next slide. This will be coming forward to the Reno City Council on March 8th. And I'm here to just receive any comments from the NAB and answer any questions that I might be able to answer.
All right, questions.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
So is this for the full length of the alley or is it just for a block?
It's only for this between St. Lawrence and Reno, right here.
Why would it not go further?
I can answer that. So this process reveal some broken processes. One is that any citizen anywhere can go to this street naming committee, which has their bylaws written on typewritten paper, and, you know, petition to have a street renamed, and this, you know, mid-level technical staff committee can go yay or nay, and then it goes up to the city council. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. You know, we need some, if we're gonna consider initiating renaming a street, it needs to start at the city council as like, you know, go through the process, do the public review and so on. So I think there's some understanding that, you know, and that gets into a big focus that the Historic Research Commission has had on how do we rename things? You know, parks, and there was a whole thing about Newlands Park a while ago and other things. The city has really needed to come to the table on renaming and naming things. It's all disparate, and this one showed that any citizen can just walk into this committee and get the ball rolling. Yeah. And it also brought up an issue that I think is really important. The one that you mentioned is, you know, we are seeing infill in a lot of these areas, and in some areas you have more homes that front an alley than on the front of the street, you know, like here. And now you have more people doing deliveries because, you know, of the, you know, Amazons and those sort of things. So you do have a different use of alleys and so on. And it wasn't, Tyler, was my previous liaison, Nick, found that some cities have gone back and actually done a whole comprehensive alley naming process. And one of my objections when it first came to council was one that it skipped the nav, but what about the rest of the alley? You know, what are we gonna do with the rest of the alley? Is it someone gonna come forward and rename it something else? And so those are still things that need to go forward, but I do think that the council needs to go through an alley analysis and an alley naming process. But, you know, the process that's been made in the last 10 years since I've been on is they would ignore when they did the street rehab projects, the alleys. They're like, they're unpaved, we don't care, we've never surveyed them. So finally they're managing those for you know, improvement, but.
So
Yeah, so it's kind of stuck with this, and it's on the to-do list to rename the rest of the alley.
Well, so this is, and as you said, there are lots and lots of houses on these alleys. And to me, it seems like, and I remember when this came up before, a few months ago, thinking, we discussed like this, there should be a whole citywide process to consider this issue of the alleys and some systematic, logical way to name them, you know, to avoid this confusion, because I'm always pointing delivery drivers back around to the alleys when they're looking for things. So, I mean, it's lovely, you know, the creamery name, the historic, it's lovely, but to me, it just doesn't make sense to name one block this and not consider the rest of the alley, the other alleys in the neighborhood, other alleys in the city. It should be part of a bigger process.
okay, other questions? So remember that all these are basically just discussion only. We're not voting on anything tonight, but everybody has the ability to fill out one of the forms that will go to the planning. Is it going to the planning commission or does it go?
Council. Actually, this one will, let's see, do you want me to make some comments to that you can get to Public Works?
Yeah, you can submit them to me and I'll send you the public work,
Yeah.
or you can
Yeah,
submit
it's
them.
not, this isn't part of the development
Okay.
process,
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I'll relay a lot of this to the council when we do this forward.
I'm gonna name the next block Jenny.
Huh?
I'm gonna name the next block Jenny.
Well, you know, I live on an alley also, and and I've called 911s over the years on those, you know, when stuff's going on. And it is hard because you're the alley bounded by, you know, Borden. I mean, I'm good with my geography, but, you know, because some people on one side call it the Borden Alley and other people call it the Reno Alley, you know, and so what alley is it? And it is an issue that the city needs to get through. Unfortunately, we have so many more units being built, not so much here, but even closer to Virginia.
And Phil, there's a lot of people tearing things down and building new things.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Well, I don't see any other questions. All right, thank you for your time. We're gonna move on to item B2, discussion of neighborhood traffic calming program. This is for discussion only. Kurt Dietrich.
Okay, I asked Kurt to come. Now, Kurt, I spent a fair amount of time on your Public Works website today. And I'm kind of setting you up, but do you have a traffic calming program? Does the city have a traffic calming program that is adopted in some way?
We do, yes, yes.
I didn't see it on the website.
Oh, okay, maybe we can get together, we can go to the
Okay.
website and see where that's.
Yeah, because I thought that we did have one. I thought we got rid of that program back in 2012 when the city cut a third of the workforce. And so maybe it got melded into something else but I thought we did not have a formal traffic calming program with guidelines and all those things.
Got it. For the record, for Detroit traffic engineer. Actually, during the Great Recession, a position was cut. That was Rebecca Capular's position.
Yes.
Who was the traffic safety advocate. So that position was cut. However, the program never really went away. Actually, the guidelines are in the design manual, Public Works design manual. So it's still there.
Okay, so it's a chapter in the traffic design manual.
Correct.
Okay.
Independent.
That's where, an appendix.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's where it
Under the
lives.
traffic- Yep.
Okay,
Under the
good, good.
traffic section.
Okay, let's let you go.
Okay, sounds great. Here's the agenda to discuss the basics of the traffic calming program. Slide. So the basics of the program is pretty much the three places physical improvements to reduce speed. And I just put up three examples here: speed humps, chokers, and slow points, which I have slides on each one. With traffic calming, we put things in the roadway essentially to slow cars down. So we have some basic designs, but we're pretty much open to whatever it takes to actually calm traffic. What's really important is it's a system-driven process. So actually, the systems come to the city of Reno for traffic calming. They can do that through Reno Direct, and ultimately it's a petition process, which I'll get into. And then lastly, it's based on need. So we'll do a traffic study. We'll see that we'll actually record speeds and see what drivers are doing. We'll look at the overall neighborhood and see what makes sense. Slide. So just typical examples of traffic calming. This is kind of our mainstay of the speed hump. The picture is worth 1,000 words. It's actually 6 inches high, and it's actually designed as a parabola. So when you hit it, it ramps up fairly quickly. And so these devices are designed for 20 miles an hour. So they're typically placed in neighborhood streets. Slide. And this is actually an angled slow point. So this provides horizontal deflection. So the speed hump actually ramps you up and back down. The angled slow point, you actually move side to side. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both. One really nice thing about speed humps is it doesn't affect parking, and you can actually park on them, and they don't affect left turns. So people can go in and out of driveways, no problem. Angled slow points, they're effective. They're less damaging to heavy vehicles. However, they take quite a bit of real estate essentially in the public roadway. You have to eliminate parking, and it also affects left turns. So again, we don't really have a lot of cookie cutter treatments because it really depends on the neighborhood. This particular location, this worked great because there was a kind of a drainage through here, and there wasn't driveways right there, so we're able to place that effectively. Slide. And here's another, actually a third example, and it's a choker. So actually, we have 2 entry vents and then a center median. And so this doesn't provide any horizontal or vertical deflection. It just gives drivers a perception that something's in the roadway and will slow down for it, but no deflection. These tend to have mixed results. We tend to kind of shy away from this unless it's the last option that nothing will really fit the neighborhood. Slide. So as far as getting the traffic calming request started and approved, staff will first determine if the street meets the city's basic criteria, and I have slides on that as well. So the reason we want to do this is we would hate for the resident to go out and collect signatures and go through the petition process, and then it doesn't meet the city's basic criteria as outlined within the Public Works design manual. So if possible, we'd like staff to have a crack at it first, just to make sure everything's lined up before the system puts in the work for the petition process. But we will welcome petitions if the system so desires to do that first. The petition requires 2/3 of the residents who actually live on that street to approve the traffic calming device, just to make sure more or less everyone's on board, or 2/3 of people are on board for the traffic calming. And then after we receive the petition and look at the basic criteria, then we'll perform the traffic study. So then we'll actually look at vehicle speeds, and then we'll assign points and start ranking projects against each other for funding. Slide. So the basic criteria, first off, the street has to be classified as a minor cluster or local street. So this is really designed for a neighborhood traffic calming program. So again, we're looking at neighborhoods, schools, multifamily. It's not really designed for major arterials. As I just mentioned, 2/3 of the street frontage must be residential, park, and or school. Postal speed limit has to be 30 miles an hour or less. That's the nature of devices. Speed humps are designed for 20 miles an hour. So anything above 30, then might actually have some traffic safety issues of people hitting them at higher speeds. And we also look at the longitudinal grade. If it just won't work because of heavy grades due to ice and snow, then we probably defer to something else like maybe a speed radar. And then lastly, we have something called the primary emergency vehicle routes. So those are the major corridors that fire uses for response. So they ask that they'd like to look at the traffic calming proposal before we actually put it on the street. Because one, it does slow down vehicle response times, emergency response times. And also it's really damaging on their equipment. They have a really heavy fire apparatus. They carry their own water, and so they'd like to take a look at whatever we do. Slide. And operational criteria. So we're looking at a street that's at least 1,000 feet long between control intersections. So when a control intersection, that's an always stop, or actually a two-way stop, or a traffic signal, because let's say always stops provide people have to slow down and stop for them anyway. So if we put a traffic calming device 100 feet from a stop sign, it's not really effective. And then we have something called the 85th percentile speed. So that's a very interesting theory. So what the 85th percentile speed means is what speed limit will 85% of the drivers will travel at or below. And so the theory behind that is 85% of people will drive at a speed that's considered reasonable or prudent, and 15% of the population is considered not prudent, not reasonable. And so what's important with the 85th percentile in traffic calming is if you want to slow the corridor down, people are going to drive at a speed that they consider reasonable or prudent. So if we usually drop the speed limit lower, but we don't make any physical improvements in the roadway, people are still going to feel comfortable driving at higher speed. Like what happened on Veterans Parkway, for instance. So what we want to do is we want to place traffic calming devices to lower the 85th, because then people are not comfortable driving at those higher speeds. So that's kind of the crux of the program. And so as far as the criteria, for a 25 mile an hour neighborhood street, we're looking at an 85th percentile of 32 or above that would qualify for the program. And then lastly, we're looking at 4,000 vehicles a day or less at every state of traffic. And that's kind of the catch. Again, we don't want to put traffic calming devices on arterials or heavy traffic roadways. Slide. And then I mentioned the point system ranking. So these are the factors that we look. And once you meet the basic criteria, it qualifies. But what the point system ranking does, it just ranks one street against another for available funding. So we're looking, we assign points for vehicular volume, percentage of vehicles actually exceeding the speed limit. The distance or the difference between the post and 85th percentile speeds, as I mentioned before, and also we prioritize school, park, playgrounds, and multifamily frontages. So, and with that, any questions?
Questions? So we'll start Carla.
Yeah, could you just review the petition process? I didn't quite get that. If I want traffic calming in my neighborhood, how do I get that process going?
Absolutely. So you have two options. You can start right with the petition, or you can submit a request for your direct. If you submit a request for your direct, we'll take a look at it, and then we'll make sure it meets some basic criteria that you're not really close to a four-way stop or some of the other factors. And if it looks good, we'll actually email you the petition. And again, if you'd like to start with the petition process right away, you have every right to do so. So once you receive a petition, you actually write down your street name, and then you decide which cross streets you want. If you essentially a block, the nearest two cross streets, and then just start knocking, go door to door and collect the 2/3 signature, and then you submit it to the city.
So it's up to the citizen to go door to door to get the 2/3.
Correct. The citizens petitioning the city for traffic calming.
I think you just answered my question, and that is, what the 2/3 of what?
The two cross streets. So, the citizen can actually select the cross streets. Sometimes they'll do multi-blocks and get the 2/3 for the multi-blocks. If there's an area where there's just not a lot of people willing to do traffic calming, then they'll shorten it down. And, so the citizen can choose their cross streets based on their feelings of their neighbors, if they really want it or not.
Thank you.
Jenny.
That was a great overview. So how many traffic calming devices did the city install last year, 2022, in neighborhoods?
Oh, 2022, that might have been the children of Vermont, or I might be thinking of 2021,
So what?
correct?
And how about 21?
Oh, I can get back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your images there, can you, how old are when were those all put in?
Oh, well, one of them was Ambassador, that's when we looked.
Okay, so Ambassador, let's talk about this, because this is another point I want to clarify is maybe we're putting in one a year, but they're not necessarily coming through the citizen route. Sometimes the city will just do it when they're going to redo a street anyway, right?
Correct, so to be completely honest with you, I'll do petitions. So a lot of times we'll take the funding and apply it to areas.
A project,
Through projects.
And what is the funding? Because we ascertained that one, we don't have a staff person dedicated to it. That per position does not exist. How much funding a year have you been?
About 120, under 20.
120. And how much does one of these devices cost?
I would probably say we're spending maybe 50,000 or around 50K. And then what we'll do is we'll use a lot of the money for speed radars as well.
Okay,
There's a lot of demand for traffic calming
Yeah.
PDVRs. And if we can't put a device in, the speed radars kind of a mainstay. So we've been
yeah.
putting a lot of that
Yeah.
money towards speed
Yeah,
radars.
but the PBR is, the fire department has this day. So I'm on the council and I hear every week from people about traffic speed concerns in their neighborhoods. And that's why I wanted this on the agenda, because I wanted to have, kind of a discussion that, one, we don't have a dedicated person to neighborhood traffic safety. It's rolled up into you and you're the head of all traffic engineering. Two, if you want in your neighborhood, you probably have to show some initiative, or you or your neighbors. Three, we have about $150,000, $120,000 a year. We're probably putting in only 2 devices at most a year. And then 4 is, I did do the work on the website and I did see it. And in your design manual, you've got Appendix A is improvement plans, Appendix B is traffic, C is excavation, D is final maps, and E is deleted. Do you think it was E?
It should be in the traffic section, traffic calming policy.
Traffic calming policy, okay, well, maybe we can spend some time looking at that, because I have spent way too much time responding to people's traffic safety slowdown issues in their neighborhoods. And, I am advocating that it become a transportation priority, and everything I see is it's not an RTC priority, it's not a city priority, because otherwise that position would have been there, and the funding, too. So I just wanted to, have because I want to point to people, I bring it up every budget. I hear neighborhood traffic and speed concerns all day long, but it doesn't equate over to a priority of resources and focus. But it's good for you, helpful for you to let us know what the baseline is. So I really appreciate you coming and explaining that tonight.
Absolutely, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure we have any active petitions, so I think it's pretty wide open right now.
Oh, no active petition.
Yeah. So, if anyone's.
Yeah,
interested,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Have you guys given any thought, because that petition process is maybe 20 years old, have you given any thought to, and a lot of places don't use the 85th percentile, that doesn't even exist any longer. And a lot of public safety agencies are also putting them on public response routes too. Have you given any thought to maybe revising the program a little bit?
Yeah, quite possibly, because as you pointed out as well, the last one that we installed on Ambassador was kind of rolled in to neighborhoods.
Okay, okay.
So I think it's slowly gravitating towards that,
Okay.
especially since we have the money and we didn't have any active petitions.
Okay, okay, great.
Any other questions from the commission? Yeah,
Compared to the little, I forget the phrase, the one that shrinks in a radar sign, what's more effective?
Let's see, the radar sign or the
Radar sign,
angle.
no, not the angled one, the pinch one.
The main one. Oh, gosh, so here's the biggest challenge, especially in the chokers, is how do you slow down a passenger car or a motorcycle per se, but not a fire truck? It's very difficult. And so that choker was actually on Beaumont Parkway, which was a major PUR. So at that point in time, that was pretty much the most aggressive treatment that we could place there. At that particular location, we did an after study and the speeds went up. And that was very surprising. We haven't seen that before. So we're going to be very cautious of using that particular treatment. So going to the speed radars, it tends to be a fixture over time. I've heard statistics maybe after 3 months, it becomes a little less effective because it becomes part of the background after a while. I say that cell points are very effective. Same thing as
How much is the sign, the radar sign cost compared to that?
let's see, we're probably paying about $3,000 for a radar sign and probably under 50,000 for a speed hump.
Thank you, appreciate it.
go ahead.
Anecdotally on the chokers, we've got some of those on Watt Street. And they get beat up really quickly in the wintertime. The snow rises above and you can't see it. And so people end up hitting those inadvertently, and then they're terrible for pedestrians. They trip over them all the time.
Okay, we had a question over with Jerry.
Oh, that was my point. I wondered what kind of problems do you have with chokers and the angled slow points when streets are slippery?
Yes, so Keystone, I'm sure everyone's driven Keystone, they have angled slow points. I really like angled slow points because they're very aggressive. You have to slow down for them. As far as snow and ice, when we designed those, we designed them for 20 miles an hour. We actually laid them out in AutoCAD and did something called auto turn and actually plotted out the highest speed so you can go through there. And then what we did is we set those up with cones at the shooting yard, so snow plows can go through. So we actually designed them for ice.
Other question, go ahead.
On the curved ones, I would guess you assume the worst behavior with some drivers. And in this type of a case, what happens? I guess if people are driving inebriated and they see this, do they end up like causing worse accidents because they're swerving now? Or do they blow right through it and then they hit something? What?
You're aimed right at the power box.
The best way, Josh, I've been in traffic engineering for about 20 years with the departments. I've never heard an instance of a ran off roadway crash due to angled slow point. If you do look at somebody, you will see tire marks on Sarah Island. It's only 6 inches high, so I suspect they just go right through, to be honest with you. It's probably a little rough on your suspension, but again, I haven't seen any ran off roadway traffic at least.
But it doesn't cause any worse accidents with people swerving inadvertently. Because having like egregious downsides to it.
Not to my knowledge that we've had any issues with these, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
Other board questions? Or we had a question back here.
Where does creating additional eligible points for pregnant road diets fit in this matrix? And Reno's got many streets that are wide enough to land lanes on.
Oh, yes.
Really, the high speeds are created by long straight right of ways, sight lines, right, and wide roads. So where's road diet in this?
So road diet. So what a road diet is when you have a traditional four-lane roadway, you have 2 travel lanes in one direction, 2 travel lanes on the other. And so it's a very wide roadway. People tend to speed. Also, the other tricky issue with the traditional four-lane roadway is if somebody is going, it wants to turn left, you have to wait for an acceptable gap in front of you to make that left. So then you could have angle collisions, and then you could have rear ends. So what a road guide does is it takes those four-lane roadways, it puts, 2 bicycle lanes, 2 travel lanes, and a 2-way left turn lane. So the 2-way left turn lane provides a little separation, between passing traffic.
Which just also reduces lane width, right? Because if you have a 30-foot lane width, people would feel more comfortable operating vehicle at high speeds. So if you reduce that lane width, something around 15 feet or 14 foot, which, EMS can still operate on, you're gonna make a driver who's driving at high speeds in a residential neighborhood feel less comfortable doing so.
Yes.
So where does that fit on?
Yes, so that probably goes back to the 85th percentile is people have at speeds that they feel comfortable. So if you have a very wide roadway, 40-foot roadway, and no one's parking there, it's going to feel comfortable for people to go faster. So by adding traffic calming treatments, it constricts the area, makes people less comfortable driving high speeds, and it lowers that 85th percentile. Is that to your question?
I mean, I'm aware of that. I'm saying, where is it in the matrix of like options for the city?
So the road diets are not necessarily part of the traffic calming program. The traffic calming program is more designed for neighborhood roadways, whereas road diets are more for arterials. It's kind of a different animal.
On full-on retrofits, and there you're balancing, you usually need to be in a full reconstruction. And you're balancing the width to give to other uses, and usually those are wider sidewalks. Bike lanes, on-street parking, and then, and even and even beyond the sidewalk, the parkway. So they're full retrofits for local roads, and haven't done a whole lot of them. The problem with Reno and local roads is our developer-driven process means we just have a really terrible street network that's emerged over years. It's like you'll see a street and you're like, this street was gonna be something, Manzanita. Oh, no, someone decided to develop here, so it's not. So you've got an 80-foot right of way that ends at someone's house. And so it's really, really poor land use planning over the years. And then that mentality of overly wide roads, which engineers used to love because they operated on the mindset that the purpose of suburban development is to get people out of, the urban core as fast as they can, And so Reno just has to really terrible wide, like local roads. Is this Ambassador?
That's Ambassador.
And what's that right away? Is it 80?
Oh boy.
What's the way?
They're the right away, back of curb to back of curb, or back of sidewalk to back of sidewalk.
Probably 80.
Yeah.
It's a wide road.
It's a wide road and it goes nowhere,
I
Huh?
think it slows me down.
Yeah, but it connects what? It connects Charlotte with Mayan, or Mayan.
Mayberry.
No, not Mayan, Mayan, yeah, yeah.
And Charlotte's.
I mean, that 80 is like, a 15,000 ADT volume.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you for your time. We're gonna move on to item B3, 0 Riverside Drive, request for proposal. This is for discussion only.
Okay, oh, good, thanks, Tyler, for putting that up there. So the city did issue an RFP for 0 Riverside that we've talked about for years. And I just wanted to let people know that. It closes, what's the date?
It closes, the submittal due date is March 9th.
Okay.
At 3 p.m.
Yeah, so still some time. Someone, a private party had made an unsolicited proposal to the council. And I'm presuming that our procurement people sent that to that person, but Tyler's checking with that, it's broadly for the public to decide, anyone to more or less pitch, I'd like to acquire this property to the city of Reno, and then it'll be the council's decision. But I just wanted to let you all know that it's out. I didn't even read the proposal yet. I just wanted to get it out here and let people know, and also let people know that it's it's coming to the council on, after the staff reviews the proposal. And, it's a property that's been, has a historic building on it. And it's been one that's been on, in focus to the NAB, and it's more or less, it's got an easement across it, but riverfront property, right, in the Booth Street area.
What's the floodplain designation mean?
Is it AE?
Yeah,
It's, I can't remember. I am going to say under current design, allowances, which probably are reasonable, unlike other design allowances where the city hasn't remapped in many, many decades. That's kind of like Southeast Reno. There are some lifting techniques for development that are appropriate to allow, development on this parcel. It's not in the critical flood pool area like where Mr. Dermody's building warehouses right now. And the Daybreak development was approved by the council. And if you look at the property on Riverside Drive at Washington Street, that's contemporary property along the river, a little bit further off the river because it's separated by River Drive. And so whatever design standards came in for that, lifting the living units is probably along the lines in which you see it's Riverside Drive. But technical folks know better than I know.
I notice there's only about an 8-foot difference between the bottom of the riverbank and some of the topo lines here on the site, which 8 feet is that's not a lot of clearance.
Yeah, so when they get in, they may have to lift the site, or lift, not the site, but lift the structure up, another so many feet.
Just a couple of things. I noticed that the report or the RFP talks about those 2 historic buildings as being beyond their economic life, which is invitation to
For demolish, yeah.
they want to.
That's unfortunate that got written that way.
Yeah, it's also zoned MF 30, and the city keeps repeating that it had an approval for a 40-unit condominium. That could not be built because it was impossible to build in there and still respect all of the easements. I'm way beyond pretending that I think that there's a chance at all that the mayor, the vice mayor, or the city manager cares at all about neighborhood input in something like this, but we will be examining what the city chooses to do with that lot, particularly in light of the abject failure of the Reno Fire Department to respond appropriately to the fire in the condominium next door. They weren't aware of the building, they weren't aware of how to access it. And one of the key things that the city claims it's looking for is to increase housing density. You're in the densest part of the city as you are, and if the city cannot adequately respond to the densest part of the city as it is, it's highly irresponsible for them to attempt to increase housing density unless or until they are willing to examine the response to the fire right next door at 1200 Riverside. And so far, let me present in its entirety the response that we've got from the city of Reno. Here it is. Nothing. They haven't lifted a finger to examine it. They haven't lifted a finger to help us out. And they intend to continue to pursue high density housing in an area that can't frankly handle it, but The city will do what the city will do regardless of neighborhood concerns.
Anybody else would like to add anything? All right,
And it was the same thing, 14-story building next door to one they couldn't service
Right.
90 days ago. So, or 120 days ago, whatever it was.
Yeah, and just for people who might have missed my haranguing on, they sent a hose truck that reached the 8th floor when the fire was on the 11th floor. They sent a rescue ladder that reached the 10th floor when rescue was needed on the 11th floor. They couldn't figure out how to park. They couldn't figure out how to access the water standpipes. They couldn't figure out how to stop sprinklers from running. And as a result, even now, we're still tearing out water damage and haven't yet been able to begin to rebuild. And absolutely no response at all from the manager or the mayor or the vice mayor.
thank you. Anybody else? Jerry,
Just, I notice it mentions the flood protection plan for future on-bank flood walls, which seems a little inconsistent with the attractive and vibrant Truckee River, which is one of the objectives of that site. I just,
Well, they do have long-range plans. I don't know, I've heard about them for years, about building a 6-foot concrete flood wall all along the Truckee in that area.
well,
So
that'll
yes,
make
that would
it
be-
pretty
That
long.
will be quite attractive.
Yeah,
And the Booth Street siphon project is coming.
Yeah.
okay. Let's move on to item B4, which is plowing of cul-de-sacs.
Yeah, we may need to pick this back, but I wanted to capture it because someone, a constituent, reached out to me and told me that they've heard from the city operations crew that they don't plow cul-de-sacs. Well, there's a lot of cul-de-sacs in Ward 1.
They don't plow a lot.
Yeah.
yeah. I got an earful from several people where I live. I live at the top of the cul-de-sac on Belford Road. There is, which isn't plowed. However, another cul-de-sac less than 100 yards away, Menlo Court, is plowed. And routinely over they come down Sunnyvale, plow the small 3-house Menlo Park cul-de-sac, continue in a northerly fashion, and then turn at Belford over to Marsden, which again, and there's twice as many houses on the Belford cul-de-sac as the Menlo Park one, or Court one. And when the snowplow does turn, of course, it piles up a nice ridge, which exacerbates the issues for the residents. So I've gotten an earful from several people on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think snow storage in the cul-de-sacs is part of the issue, and I'd really like to understand, and we'll keep it on, what they're thinking, and maybe they have different cul-de-sac, they can get it, it would seem like they should be able to move it all into the center of a cul-de-sac. But, they don't hit a lot of local roads, they're so low priority, but in a year like this, everything's, sooner or later, they were getting to lower priority ones because it lasted so long. I will say that on, actually, I think one was a cul-de-sac, when people did reach out to me about problems, particularly tough situations, more in the higher elevations, the staff would put it on a route, and I think they just use it to absorb it into their routing, like this street, this little stretch here is very difficult, can't get there. And so they'll put it on their, routing. And so they are pretty good. They do rely upon that feedback to help them, get people able to be, pass out of their neighborhoods, even if they're local roads, they're not going to be a school route level priority, but they will get a local road where, say, a weekend, no one can get out, you know, in a two-wheel drive car. And, but I'm particularly concerned about the cul-de-sacs because it was almost a blanket, statement that was repeated to me is we don't do cul-de-sacs. I was like, I don't know about that.
I mentioned it to several people who complained about ours, because one or two people down at the end do park on the street. And I said, well, you know, if you park on the street, there isn't enough turning radius for some of these plows.
Yeah,
But again, it was inconsistent, so.
yeah. And that may be just because they've thrown one onto the route because they've got that one and they have it incorporated. So anyway, yeah, we'll keep this.
Is that Arena Direct?
Yeah, these are Arena Direct calls, yeah. So we'll try to get someone from operations here once things slow down for them and have them give us a little bit of feedback about how they feel Ward 1 is covered in a big year. Because I don't want to lose sight of that. We used to at council, and the new manager gave that up, have Public Works come and give the winter preparation presentation, you know, every year. And I always liked it because it's like, well, you know, we just had that and we heard, and I think it's just every year I like to have that presentation, but we're not doing those now, so we can do them here. So anyway, that's that, yeah.
Maybe even to hear how they plow, right? So they don't plow uphill, they only plow downhill in that
Yeah,
direction.
Yeah, and then, you know, brining approaches too. I don't know, you know, the limits of brining. I don't think they brine on local roads. But,
No.
you know,
Whose responsibility is it to clear the sidewalks, for instance, over the red light overpass up on Arlington? I've had a number of appointments at Arlington, and I walked,
Yeah.
and I've had to walk in the bike lane.
yeah, no, I did too one day. And yeah, and I mentioned the California wall up here. I was like, please, school's starting on Monday, and I think that first or Tuesday, I think they had a delay, so, you know, it's like, you know, get it as soon as you can, you know, right before school starts, because it was coming, but it's always the property owner. And if the city is the property owner, like it's adjacent a park, the city has to do it. You know, the city has to follow the rules that they set out for everyone else.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because you can tell, a lot of those apartment buildings and other complexes weren't keeping up on the sidewalk, some were, but that area that goes over the railroad, is that city owned?
Yeah, yeah,
So it
but
would
I'm
be-
trying to think on, yeah, that's city owned.
Yeah, I don't think anyone ever got out there to clean off that
Yeah,
sidewalk.
I mean, actually, you know, yeah, that is city maintenance, because we own the trench.
Okay.
Which we're gonna talk about, actually.
All right, any other?
Mr. Chairman, before we move on, Tyler Shaw, Community Liaison for the record. I did connect with our maintenance and operations staff. Unfortunately, we weren't available to come tonight, but they did send me some materials about the filing of cul-de-sacs, and they're included in your board
Oh,
packets.
yeah, okay.
So in your packet, there's a frequently asked questions list, which address why some cul-de-sacs might be plowed while some aren't. And it addresses the requirements for plowing, it addresses plow truck size. And it's got all sorts of good information in there, just for your reference, until we can connect with maintenance and operations staff.
All right, thank you. This one probably should have been tied to B3, but we're gonna move on to item B5, notable displacement occurrences in Ward 1, including but not limited to 1,000 Riverside Drive.
That's like 1,200, right?
1,200, yeah, 1,200, yeah.
No, it says 1,000. I read it right.
You read it right.
And, you know, I'll just say, you know, haven't heard anything about that either. The fire chief declined to meet with me on my regular scheduled meeting to discuss this. My other issues, who's not met with me, nor is the city manager meeting with me. Nor are they answering my inquiries. I texted them, I think on February 6th, when I read that an apartment was destroyed on Orange Lane, which is over the Kissy Grove area, and several homes were displaced, and wanted to know specifics, because I really am focused on residential displacements due to fire, even if they're temporary. I think they should be front and center, just like other things like traffic fatalities, homeless deaths, and officer involved shootings. So you know, we'll continue to bring these up. Orange Lane, Tyler and I drove by there and couldn't really see, and we haven't, you know, gotten a copy of the fire report, but there is a displacement over there. And usually the Red Cross will come in and be there, and I've been at fire sites when the Red Cross is there and helping people find housing, and a lot of times they are these apartments, and just really tough stories happen when a fire comes through your apartment building. I mean, you all are dealing, I don't wanna underestimate the hardship that 1200 Riverside Drive has, but there is a significant difference in individual resources in a condominium where most people are owner occupants and, you know, have insurance to that, and a low-income apartment complex over in the Ski Row area, because, you know, if you're burnt out, even if, you know, the landlord was negligent that night, you know, no one is responsible to get you other housing. And that is becoming an increasing concern to me, is what happens to people when we have fires. And I think right now there's an alert out for an arsonist. But I think that there's been a series of fires, but I don't, I saw a press release on that. I haven't had any communication with our chief, but I think that arsonist has not, has looked, from what I could tell, is doing vacant and commercial buildings, not you know, housing.
You know, there's no doubt that we're very lucky at 1200 Riverside that most of our owners were insured. However, most people are at a point now where their insurance benefits have run out, and they're still tearing out water damage.
Yeah.
I'd love it, but I do not expect the city to acknowledge any responsibility for the Reno Fire Department's response. The one thing that I asked that would be so easy for them to do that would help us not be displaced anymore is help us with a dedicated person to expedite building permits so that we can go forward. And right now, we're finally at a point where people can start to rebuild, and they have to get in line in the building department.
Yeah, I'll have Tyler convey that request. You made that request to the council. Now, in 1200 Riverside, you know, it raises big policy questions, obviously, about our ability to respond to high rises, you know, wherever they are, the Zero Riverside, wherever, and we're building more. But it also raises, you know, questions, you know, presumably if your insurance company is gonna, or someone's insurance company is gonna file claims against the city, and then you move into negligence, and that word that I never really can get, subrogation, that will come to the council, because there's no settlement ability by anyone on the city manager or fire chief to settle something in the numbers that we've had. And you start going to court, then it's a whole different thing too. But a lot of times insurance agencies will, you know, work things out, but then risk payouts, like the one with that officer involved shooting, they have to come to the council for settlement when they hit a certain level. We may not, you know, we may hear about it in that way.
Yeah, I don't. I know some people have consulted attorneys whether or not they will bring any action against the city of Reno or not. I don't know, but my personal opinion is the city could have waylaid even that as being a possibility if they would just respond to us when we ask for simple things like help us get our building permit so that we can move forward.
Yeah,
Because where we're gonna start running up expenses that aren't covered by insurance are, you know, now we have to pay for housing out of pocket. And despite the fact that, you know, we're condominium owners, we're elder people, many who are on fixed incomes, and they can't really afford to pay, because we gotta keep paying our own fees.
yeah, you gotta pay your.
Gotta keep
Yeah.
paying, PG&E, at PG&E, Nevada Energy, both there and elsewhere. And after a time, even people who are better off than others are gonna struggle.
Yeah, and it's just, it'll, I think what I will see, and I spoke with someone years ago who was part of a neighborhood down in Northern California that burned out, is people start to sell. They start to sell, they cut their losses, they sell, they move on, and it's new people who come in and rebuild, or speculative people. And so, yeah, and also the other towers of concern to me, if that they don't have a working response there, then, and something happens, that's very frightening to me. But I want to keep this focus on fire activity in Ward 1 as related to housing displacement, because I think it's a very serious matter. And we all know about you all, you're still displaced. I'm trying, but I've not been able to get any understanding on these households and their displacement.
The most vulnerable people, I mean, we just talked about homelessness.
Yeah. And so, they're at the mercy of the Red Cross and whatever resources they bring. Usually.
Any other statements, comments, questions? I've seen none. We're gonna move on to the next one, and I'm gonna read this one. Discussion about the legacy of the retract project to West Reno neighborhoods as related to the city-owned property and split ownership of private structure and railroad-owned properties along the corridor. Okay.
This is something I asked to come on because it more or less came before the council recently, and I just want everyone. There's people who know and live this situation very intimately, but then there's other people who, don't know the history, but wonder what's going on in some of these areas. So around 96, 97, the city started doing a depressed railroad track infrastructure project. I think it was, at the time, the most expensive infrastructure project ever in Northern Nevada. I think it was $1 billion. And as part of that, I think some federal legislation had to go through to work with the railroads, that is, Southern Pacific, Union Pacific, whatever, but it's the main line, that across the country back to the Golden Spike and all that, to suppress it so that you didn't have all these out-grade crossings through downtown, through Arlington Avenue, through Virginia, through Sierra and Center Street and so on. So, a lot of cities have done these. So the city did that. And it was a very involved process. I was staff for most of it. And there was federal money that came in. There was also assessments. So properties in the corridor were assessed and continue to be. But as a part of that, the city got a lot of property on either side of the tracks where they were to be suppressed. And a lot of those were leased out by the railroad to different individuals. And sometimes those individuals had structures. So you had a split ownership of the railroad owning the land, but then the leasee owning or operating a business out of a structure that was on that land. And it all worked fine, and then the city took those over and the rent payments went to pay for the retract, for the debt on the retract, which is its own story, because that got mortgaged to the hill. But it's a vulnerable ownership situation when you don't own the land. And a lot of those lease agreements are at any time the land can get, the railroad or the city could just say, get rid of your building, we want it back, 180 days notice, get out of here. And so, but in some instances, and this is where West Reno comes into play, the decision of where the city took the land more or less ended at Keystone Avenue. So the city owns the land, and the city in some instances owns the structures, or private people rent structures on there. Keystone Avenue all the way to, say, Sutra, where the tracks started to come up. But the decision of Keystone, I think it was both sides of Keystone, left where you're starting to put the tracks down Dickerson Road on its own. So Dickerson Road, all those developments there, properties there, are still owned by the railroad. and the people leased to the railroad. And there's been a tremendous conversion over there. A lot of little shops and retail and still some industrial. But those folks, you know, unfortunately, don't get the option to approach the city to buy the land like people elsewhere on the corridor do and have. And recently, someone came forward to the council on some West Fourth Street land who had bought the structures and wanted to approach the council about buying the land. And, you know, the theory for cities to own land is don't own anything you don't want to use, because you want it on the tax rolls. It's like any property you own kind of can be a pain to own and manage. You know, there's responsibilities with property ownership. So I really do support the city disposing of this land. And the city, and Tyler, can you just go through, when the city did retract, they did so many exhaustive kind of visioning about what would, you know, this new area along the, what was the potential for these new areas along the retract border. Some of it's on West Fourth Street, some of it's over by Dickerson, you know, figure ground map, building footprints, pattern and streets and block map. Let's go to the next one, Tyler. There was one there, view conditions. They talked about the view corridors, the parks and public open space. Let's see the next one. We found a really good one actually in my office, because I have a lot of this stuff. Keep going, Tyler. Opportunity sites, okay? And was there another one after that, Tyler?
Oh, there's lots.
Patterns of development and change. So it was really, the city was really gonna follow up on what to do with all these lands. And at this point, 20 years later, the city is basically letting anyone walk in the door and want to buy land, you know, make an offer. And we put some parameters on. We really do want to favor adjoiners to buy land near them. But I'm also seeing a pattern of haphazard and incompatible uses. So for example, on West Fourth Street, this nonprofit group came in and wants to build housing more or less across where Stoker dumps out. And we gave them land to build a housing project, which is going to be for young women. And then we've also sold off to people who, you know, have the potential to do industrial uses. And the city needs to go in there and decide if we're just willy-nilly selling people to whatever they want and creating, you know, potential conflicts of housing and or industrial uses. And some of the early concerns about, well, adjacent to the railroad, the vibration as they go through the tunnel and so on, I think, you know, has been examined to some degree, and you can't put housing up there. There is not that much shaking that goes on as they, particularly closer to Keystone Avenue. But I really don't want people to lose track of this history, because the last time it came to council to sell this land, the staff had not done any analysis on, you know, looking at the history and understanding where we're going and where we've been on this. And we continue to own a bunch of land. And the Dickerson people also, who have a lot, some of those people have tremendous investment in those structures. I had always hoped that at some point the city would return to our federal delegation and ask them to help us get the Dickerson land from the railroads too, so that we could allow that area to thrive under a dual ownership. So anyway, I just wanted to bring this history over to everyone, and it's more or less settled through downtown. You know, we've got a couple lid issues that this council has kind of haphazardly approved, this thing called Locomotion Plaza and the dog park. But as you get west, it's really unsettled land with a lot of uses over there.
Any questions regarding this?
But we have actually, on Vine Street right now, there's a project under construction, which is, you know, not particularly linear. It's big enough, and the city gave it to an affordable housing developer who's going to be building apartments over there, and it really helps that project get done. So we are, you know, there are examples of us using it in good ways. And I think we could do so much more if we were strategic about how to dispose of those lands.
Just as a comment, I guess, that a lot of that land, particularly going west, just seems neglected and defunct and if you have a lease on a building that can go away in 180 days, you're certainly not gonna invest in it.
No, there's people, I mean, if you all go out to Dickerson Road, it's just a really joyful area. But there are some people, there's an auto guy who has so much investment in his repair, and then there's some retailers who have just continued, like the pottery studio, continue to invest. So,
Great thing.
Other questions, comments?
yeah, okay. Good, well, thank you everyone for letting me go through that history, because I don't want it to be lost.
We're gonna move on to item C, board, commission, committee members, reports and announcements. I don't see any. All right, we're gonna move on to item D, future agenda items. Sure. Stormwater.
Stormwater, okay, we will have an update on the stormwater, even if it's not a public input session, we'll ask for that. Tyler's gonna get the schedule. I'd like to see if we can get some winter plowing, backstory from that staff. And then, I wouldn't mind March or April, understanding, what's still to be done in Ward 1, the projects that didn't get going last year.
If we do have a discussion about it, it would really be helpful to have somebody from staff that could answer some of the more specific
Yeah.
questions,
Yeah,
attend.
yeah. But for all I know, it could be on the March 8th agenda, and a whole different conversation.
Joey, you had a question?
And a possible agenda items, the number of city council seats is gonna change. So maybe it would be good to have a report on what the process is for that.
The redistricting.
Yeah.
Okay. That,
Just like, what's the process?
yeah, we can get that. That may or may not be able to come in March because, this council, I did not support it, is trying to, change the charter to not do that.
Yeah, because I actually went back and read it and like, okay, well, this is pretty specific.
Yes,
They go back and
yeah.
do
So
something.
if that bill is still in play, we can give an update on that bill, but if that bill dies, we will move forward with the redistricting. And having just gone through a redistricting, it's unusual to do a second redistricting 2 years later. I support it. I want that at large to have some direct constituents to work with. But it's a change. I mean, Watt Street project wasn't even in Ward 1 and it became this big focus, so it does have implications. But yes, we do need a conversation on how we will redistrict and what we learned on that. And since we did it, everyone knows how to do it. That's the problem with redistricting. You do it every 10 years and no one remembers how to do it.
Well, we can blame it on me because I'm the new guy.
Any other future agenda items? All right, seeing none, we're gonna move on to item E, public comment.
Well, I don't know if this is appropriate, but the three of us live at Barbara Bennett Park.
Oh,
And we understand that there's maybe some things that might impact us that are happening or maybe happening at the park, and we know nothing about it. I heard you maybe say something about a survey, we didn't get that.
We had this on last month's agenda, that's why I was aware of it, so, NAB agenda.
Oh, yeah, that must be on last night.
Yeah. Are you the Island Drive people? Are you guys Island Drive? Okay.
And also promenade on the
Oh, your promenade too, yeah. So, the Arlington Avenue Bridge is in the queue to be rebuilt. And that redesign, that design is in process. There was a fair amount of, it really kicked off right before the pandemic started. And there were some periods, I think like last year in the spring, remember we had a meeting here and then we moved out into McKinley and there was a meeting. Does anyone remember that? The public is what? So RTC is leading it up. And I don't sit on the RTC board.
But Tyler is organizing a meeting with myself and Commissioner Hill, who also represents the area, to meet, as I will anytime with a group of residents anywhere at the promenade, you know, so they reached out to my office. So we're gonna meet with you all and she'll bring the RTC staff to tell you where we're at. But, at minimum, you know, maybe go to the RTC website, and have you looked to see if the project page there?
We didn't hear anything about the park being impacted. We knew that the span was going to be rebuilt. We didn't hear.
Well, the city decided at the same time to reimagine Barbara Bennett Park, you know, because everything's gonna be out of commission. And I supported that. I said, you know, this is Wakefield particularly is looking really aged. So we did get an update at our last meeting on that, and then that input, they'll come up with a design and bring it to council. But maybe Tyler, when we meet with the promenade folks and the Island Drive people, maybe the parks people could be there also. And you could also.
Well, we get notified of that meeting, because we don't live at Promenade, we live at the condominiums, so we apartment.
Yeah,
I'd be happy. to-
yeah.
I'll come up and get your contact information. We can get it all sorted out.
Yeah, and we could even move that meeting to McKinley if wanted. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm assuming your meetings aren't recorded, so we could see what the conversation was last month.
They are recorded and they will post, I think I don't know if it's been posted to the City of Reno's YouTube page yet, but it will be posted if it hasn't already. And the materials are made available to the public, so you will be able to see the presentation. And I can connect with you guys and give you all that information as well.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it was the park planning staff and consultant, right?
Is Katrina Mercer and Barb Sanger.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the park staff and their consultant.
Right, any other public comment? All right, anything else there? That's fair.
If anyone on the Zoom would like to give public comment, please indicate so by pressing the raise hand function on your Zoom feature down at the bottom. There are no public comments, Mr. Chairman.
Well, then we'll move on to item F. This is the one thing we do get to act on, so. Adjournment.
I move my shirt.
I second.
All those in favor?
Hi.
Anyone opposed?